In today's video, I'm going to tell you a story that starts with a storm. Not the kind that only shakes the sky, but the kind that quietly changes the course of two lives forever. Before we begin, a quick note. One of my close friends just started a truly amazing YouTube channel, and I've left the link in the description below. If you enjoy stories like this one, you'll love his content too, so make sure to check it out after this video. Now let's begin. Claire's suitcase rolled across the polished airport floor, its small wheels humming against the tiles as she rushed to keep up with the tide of travelers. Her phone buzzed in her hand, another weather alert. Chicago was under a storm warning. She sighed softly. Of course. The one day she finally arrived on time, the skies decided to open up. By the time Claire and her boss, Adrian Hale, reached the hotel, the drizzle had turned into a roaring downpour that drowned out even the city's usual noise. Thunder cracked somewhere above the skyline, and sheets of rain blurred the glowing lights beyond the glass doors. Claire brushed the water from her coat, her hair clinging to her cheeks as she followed Adrian toward the reception desk. Adrian, tall, composed, and impossibly calm, looked exactly the same as he always did. Crisp shirt, perfect posture, that quiet confidence that drew both admiration and distance. He wasn't unkind, just untouchable. The kind of man who could silence a meeting room with a single glance, yet never raised his voice. Claire respected him deeply, maybe a little too deeply. He was brilliant, organized, and precise. Working under him at the Seattle marketing firm had been both a challenge and an education. But she never thought she'd be standing beside him in a hotel lobby, soaked to the bone, waiting for a room key that would soon test her composure in ways she'd never imagined. The young receptionist looked up with a nervous smile. "I'm so sorry, sir. The storm has caused several cancellations and delays. We've filled every available room in the area." Adrian leaned slightly forward, his tone still polite. "We had 2 rooms reserved under Hale and Associates." "Yes, sir," the clerk stammered, tapping the keyboard again. "Unfortunately, due to overbookings, one of them was reassigned before you checked in. The only thing we have left is..." He hesitated. "1 room. 1 bed." The words hung in the air. Claire felt her heart skip. She turned toward Adrian, expecting him to protest, to demand another solution. But instead he pressed his lips together, nodded once, and slid his credit card across the counter. "We'll take it," he said simply. Before she could speak, it was done. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was silent except for the hum of machinery and the faint echo of thunder outside. Claire kept her eyes on the floor indicator, trying not to think about how close they were standing. The smell of rain clung to his suit, clean, sharp, and strangely comforting. When the elevator chimed, Adrian stepped out first, his movements controlled, efficient. He swiped the card, opened the door, and gestured for her to enter. The room was warm and softly lit, but the first thing Claire saw made her freeze. 1 bed. Large, yes, but still one. She tried to mask her expression, busying herself with her suitcase. Adrian set his briefcase on the desk and exhaled. "It's just 1 night, Claire," he said calmly. "We'll manage." He said it so casually, so rationally, as if this were just another business inconvenience. She forced a polite smile. "Of course. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Not really. She set her things down, pretending to check her emails, her hands trembling slightly. The rain outside battered against the window, the sound filling the room. Adrian loosened his tie, sat at the desk, and powered up his laptop. The glow from the screen cast soft light across his face, revealing the faint exhaustion under his eyes, the kind that came from too many deadlines and too little rest. Claire opened her own laptop, though her mind was far from work. Every few moments her eyes wandered, not intentionally but helplessly, toward him. There was something about seeing him outside the office walls, away from the polished conference tables and structured formality. Here in this quiet room he seemed human. For a while, the only sounds were the storm, the clicking of keyboards, and the rhythm of their breathing. Finally, Adrian closed his laptop with a quiet sigh and rubbed the back of his neck. "I think that's enough for 1 night," he said, his voice lower now, almost gentle. Claire nodded, though she wasn't sure what to do with her hands, her gaze, her thoughts. Adrian stood, stretching slightly, a subtle motion that made the air between them shift. She quickly looked away, pretending to check something on her phone. He walked toward his suitcase, unbuttoning his cufflinks, then carefully folded his shirt and reached for a simple t-shirt. The soft rustle of fabric seemed louder than the rain for a moment. Claire's pulse quickened. She told herself not to notice, not to think, not to feel. A few minutes later, she climbed into the bed, or rather, onto the farthest edge of it, clutching the blanket like a lifeline. Adrian turned off the lights and lay down on the opposite side. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight. The storm outside howled. Inside, silence filled every corner, thick and electric. Claire stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding. She tried to focus on her breathing, but the nearness of another person, him of all people, made it impossible. Every small movement felt magnified, every shift in the sheets a whisper in the dark. And then softly his voice broke the silence. "Strange night, isn't it?" She startled slightly, turning her head toward him. His face was barely visible in the dim light, just a faint outline against the window's glow. "Yeah," she whispered back. "Not what I expected." He chuckled quietly, a warm, low sound that made something inside her uncoil. "Me neither. But maybe someday we'll laugh about this." She smiled in the dark, though he couldn't see it. "Maybe." A pause followed, calm, gentle. Then Adrian said quietly, "I hope you're comfortable, Claire. I don't want you to feel uneasy." His tone wasn't formal now. It was softer, sincere. The kind of voice she hadn't heard from him before. And for the first time that night she believed him. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her heart told a different story. Outside, thunder rolled again. The rain hammered against the window as if the world beyond that glass no longer mattered. Inside, something fragile and unspoken filled the room. Not words, not actions, just presence. A silent understanding that maybe, just maybe, this night wasn't only about the storm outside. It was about the one quietly unfolding within them. The night dragged on slowly. Sleep came in restless waves, interrupted by flashes of lightning and the occasional rumble of thunder that rattled the windows. Each time Claire stirred, she found herself acutely aware of Adrian's quiet breathing beside her, steady, calm grounding. When dawn finally crept through the thin hotel curtains, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed in quiet. Soft sunlight filtered across the room, painting the walls in pale gold. Claire blinked awake, disoriented for a moment. Then the memories of the night before returned. The rain, the single bed, the gentle tone in Adrian's voice. He was already up, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in hand. His shirt sleeves rolled up, his posture relaxed in a way she had never seen before. For once, the man who was always in control looked almost peaceful. "Morning," she said quietly. He turned, offering her a small, genuine smile. "Good morning. I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she replied, sitting up slowly. "Is the storm over?" He nodded. "Sky's clear. Flights should resume by noon." There was a moment of silence, not awkward, just thoughtful. The world outside looked refreshed, cleansed by the night's chaos. Inside, though, something between them had shifted ever so slightly. Adrian poured her a cup of coffee and handed it over. "Milk, no sugar, right?" She blinked, surprised. "You remembered?" He gave a small, almost shy shrug. "I pay attention." The simple words carried weight, far more than he likely intended. They sat in quiet companionship, sipping coffee, listening to the distant hum of the city coming back to life. It was strange. They had spent countless hours together in the office, surrounded by deadlines and meetings. Yet this silence here felt more personal than any conversation they'd ever shared. Finally, Adrian set his cup down. "Last night, thank you for handling it so well," he said. "I know it wasn't ideal." Claire smiled faintly. "It was fine. Just unexpected." He hesitated, then added softly, "You made it easier." Her pulse skipped. There was no reason for those words to matter as much as they did, but they did. They packed their things in quiet rhythm. Him folding clothes with methodical precision, her tucking away her laptop and charger. When they stepped out of the room, Claire glanced back once, as though trying to memorize the quiet echo of the space. By noon, they were back at the airport. The chaos of travel had resumed, the crowd, the announcements, the noise. But beneath it all, Claire felt a calm she couldn't quite name. They boarded the plane side by side, both tired but somehow changed. She noticed how he smiled a little more easily now, how his shoulders seemed less burdened. And when he offered her his jacket after she shivered from the air conditioning, she didn't protest. For most of the flight, they sat in silence. Not the distant kind, but the comfortable kind that only comes after sharing something unspoken. When they landed in Seattle, the world seemed to resume its usual rhythm. Adrian's phone buzzed nonstop as they walked through the terminal. Calls, messages, meetings, reality pulling him back. Back to the real world, Claire said softly, half to herself. Adrian looked at her, a trace of something unreadable in his expression. Yeah, but maybe not exactly the same as before. She met his eyes and felt that familiar pull, quiet, steady, undeniable. Maybe not. They shared a small smile before parting ways, each stepping back into their separate worlds. Days turned into weeks. The trip became just another story the office whispered about. That crazy storm in Chicago. But for Claire and Adrian, it wasn't something to laugh off. It lingered. Something subtle had shifted in their conversations. His tone, once purely professional, now carried a quiet warmth. He asked about her day more often, noticed when she seemed tired, and occasionally brought her coffee. Always with just the right amount of milk, no sugar. She in turn found herself understanding him better. His silence, his precision, the rare moments when his guard dropped. There was still a line between them. Invisible but real, drawn by professionalism, by logic, by circumstance. But sometimes when their eyes met across a meeting table, or lingered a moment too long after work, that line blurred. One evening, a few months later, they found themselves leaving the office at the same time. The sky was painted in the soft colors of sunset, and the city hummed around them. Dinner? Adrian asked, almost casually, as though it wasn't a big deal. But to Claire it was. She smiled. Are you sure that's not against company policy? He laughed. The same warm laugh she'd first heard in that dark hotel room months ago. We'll keep it strictly about marketing strategy. I promise. They ended up at a small Italian place near the water, the kind of cozy restaurant where time slowed down. Conversation came easily. Stories, memories, laughter that came from somewhere genuine. At one point, as the light flickered from the candles on their table, Adrian looked at her and said quietly, "You know, that night in Chicago, I realized something." Claire tilted her head. "What's that?" "That sometimes the most unexpected moments are the ones that remind us we're human," he said. "I've spent years keeping everything under control, my work, my image, my life. But that night, being stuck in one room, with the storm outside, it made me realize control isn't everything." She smiled softly. "You mean it's okay to just feel?" He nodded, meeting her gaze. "Exactly." For a moment neither of them spoke. The sound of the rain, light and distant now, brushed against the windows, like a memory of that night echoing softly between them. And just like that, the story that began in a storm found its calm. It wasn't about grand gestures or sudden confessions. It was about two people learning, quietly, that sometimes life brings you together in unexpected ways. And that maybe, just maybe, certain nights aren't meant to be forgotten because they change the way you see everything after. As they walked out of the restaurant that night, the city lights shimmered across the wet pavement. Claire laughed at something Adrian said, and for the first time, he laughed too, freely, without the weight of perfection. The world had moved on from that storm long ago, but for them, it had left something behind. A reminder that even in the most ordinary lives, moments of connection can appear out of nowhere and change everything. Because sometimes, it's not the thunder or the rain that stays with you. It's the quiet heartbeat beside you when the world outside finally goes still.